All right, we've seen an example of like this before where we have a demand equation and a supply equation. But now we're going to put a tax on producers. Another example we looked at a tax on consumers. So let's first draw out our supply and demand equation. So our demand equation, 100 minus q, the y-intercept is 100. A slope of -1 means we'll be over here at 100. The supply curve starts off at 10 and has a slope of 1. That means our equilibrium price and quantity is 45 as for quantity, and P star is 55. All right, and now we want to look to see what happens when we introduce this tax on suppliers. So if we tax consumers, it's going to cause the demand curve to shift. But as we tax suppliers, it's going to cause the supply curve to shift, and it will shift it up the size of the tax, which in this case is $10. So our new supply equation with the tax is our original supply equation, P is equal to 10 plus Q, where we just shift it up by 10. So it's going to equal 20 plus Q. So our new intercept here is 20. And now what we need to do is find this point here where our new supply equation is equal to our original demand equation. And when we set those lines equal to each other and solve them, we should come up with our new quantity for taxes. Okay, so let's set those equal. So we get 20 plus Q, which is our new supply equation, and set that equal to our original demand equation, 100 minus Q. I bring Q to this side, so I get 2Q is equal, subtract 20 from each side, 80. So my quantity with tax is equal to 40. All right, now there's 2 points I need to look at. One is the price to the buyer, the other is the price to the consumer. So I take that 40 and put it into my original demand equation. That's the price that the buyer must pay. I take that 40 and put it into the original supply equation. That's the price that the seller receives. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So this point here is price is equal to 100 minus Q of our taxes, which is 40. So it's 100 minus 40, where the new price is 60. So the buyers have to pay $60 for this. Now, $60 is the price that the seller receives plus the tax. So I could just take 60, subtract off 10, because this distance here is the tax. Or I can just put in 40 into the original supply equation. So the price is equal to 10 plus Q of the tax, which is 10 plus 40, which is 50. So the price that the seller receives is 50. So now we've solved all the key points. Is we know the new quantity is 40, the price the buyer pays is 60, the price the seller receives is 50, and the difference between those is the size of the tax, which is 10. So now I can calculate consumer and producer surplus. All right, so this triangle here is consumer surplus. Well, if I look at, we'll go down here, consumer surplus is just 1/2 base times height. So it's 1/2. The base of this is this distance here, which is QT, or 40. And the height is 100 minus 60, and that's also 40. So 1/2 times 40 is 800. So that's the consumer surplus. To find producer surplus, I look at the price that the seller receives and find the triangle all the way to the supply curve. There's producer surplus. So producer surplus is equal to, it's a triangle, so it's 1/2 base times height. The base is 40. The height is 50 minus 10, which is also 40. So the producer surplus is 800. And now I can look at the tax revenue, which is the size of the tax times the number of units they sell. And so tax revenue is equal to the base, which is 40, times the height, which is 10, which is 400. To find dead weight loss is this triangle here. So dead weight loss is equal to, and since it's a triangle, it's 1/2 base times height. 1/2, the base is 45 minus 40, which is 5. The height is the size of the tax, which is 10. So that's 50 divided by 2, which is 25. And so there we've calculated the important regions of a tax on producers. Now, one thing to note, we look at this example. Now let's look at the example we did just previously when we had a tax on the consumer. So here is the exact example of tax on consumer. And what you notice is we've calculated the same areas for each of these. And what this shows is that it doesn't matter if you tax the producer, which is this case, or the consumer, which is this case. You get the exact same answer in terms of price to the buyer, price to the seller, quantity with the tax. You get the same consumer surplus, producer surplus, tax revenue, and dead weight loss. So whenever you hear a politician say we don't want to tax consumers, instead we want to tax businesses, what they're saying is we want to tax producers. But as a constituent or as an intelligent person, you should know it doesn't matter if you tax consumers or producers. The outcome is exactly the same. If you tax producers, they'll pass on that tax to consumers. If you tax consumers, they'll pay it directly. And so whether you tax producers or consumers, it does not change the optimal solution.